You are listening to KSG podcast. This is a short, crisp, concise, exam-oriented, edited editorial for civil services aspirants. In this podcast, we are going to talk about India-Iran ties. Source for the content is Rajeev Agarwal's article for the Diplomat. Iran's foreign minister, Dr. Hossein Amir-Abdollahian, was on an official visit to India from the 8th of June to 10th of June 2022, during which he held talks with Dr. S. Jaishankar, the Indian External Affairs Minister. This was his first visit to India since assuming office in August 2021 and comes at a crucial juncture amid geopolitical churn not only in the region but across the globe. The official statement released by the Ministry of External Affairs highlighted the exchange of views on important issues like the Iran nuclear deal, the Ukraine conflict, and the situation in Afghanistan. India appreciated the role of Iran in facilitating India's medical assistance to Afghanistan, including supply of COVID-19 vaccines to Afghan nationals residing in Iran. In addition, all bilateral issues, including cooperation in the field of regional connectivity and the progress made at the Chabahar port, were reviewed. Exuding confidence at the outcome of the visit, the Iranian foreign minister said that preparing a roadmap for strategic cooperation between Iran and India can regulate long-term relations and protect it from the impact of destructive factors. India and Iran share close historical ties from the times of Persian Empire and Indian kingdoms. Iran is an important nation in India's neighborhood, and in fact, the two countries shared a border until India's partition and independence in 1947. Iran is also important to India as it provides an alternate route of connectivity to Afghanistan and Central Asian republics in the absence of permission for India to use the land route through Pakistan. India-Iran relations have, however, witnessed ups and downs over the decades, mostly owing to factors that go beyond strictly bilateral issues like the stoppage of oil imports from Iran after May 2019, owing to US sanctions following the revocation of the Iran nuclear deal, India's close relations with Israel, and Iran's ties with China, including signing a 25-year strategic partnership agreement. There are other sticky issues too, like Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen launching drone attacks against Saudi Arabia and UAE, both close partners to India, or Iran's statement on the Indian government's abrogation of Article 370 of Indian Constitution, which gave special status to Kashmir. Iran, on its end, has not taken kindly to India succumbing to international pressure of sanctions on Iran. However, both countries have tried to keep their engagement above such occurrences and maintain a cordial trajectory of bilateral ties. Now, talking about favorable conditions for a reset, despite the rather subdued engagement with Iran, there are a number of areas of convergence and enhanced engagement for India to consider. Afghanistan presents one such opportunity. The Taliban government has largely been isolated since it took over Kabul in August 2021. Iran was one of the few countries that did not withdraw its embassy from Kabul and has continued to keep its channels of communication open with the Taliban. India, on the other hand, was quick to wind up its embassy in Kabul, but has now indicated that it is keen to reopen its embassy in some form shortly. A delegation from India met the Taliban foreign minister in Kabul on the 2nd of June 2022. Iran and India have collaborated already in the past on Afghanistan, and Iran's role as a viable direct land route to Afghanistan is undisputable. India and Iran have the potential to forge a common and effective policy of engagement with Afghanistan in the future. The Iran nuclear deal, which is at a stage for impasse, offers the next opportunity for convergence between India and Iran. 8 rounds of talks in Vienna since April 2021 have not yielded any positive results. Any hopes of an early resolution were dashed by the recent announcement by the IAEA that it had adopted a resolution formally criticizing Iran for a lack of cooperation. The resolution was supported by the US, UK, France, and Germany and opposed by Russia and China. On the same day, the Terrorist Financing Targeting Center, TFTC, a group of countries led by the US and Gulf nations, sanctioned 3 individuals associated with Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force, that is IRGC-QF. It may be recalled that the designation of the IRGC as a terrorist organization is one of the major sticking points between the US and Iran on the nuclear deal. No nuclear deal means no lifting of economic sanctions on Iran and no crude oil exports from Iran. India which has stressed exercising its strategic autonomy while importing oil from Russia amid sanctions on Russia due to its war with Ukraine, could explore a similar decision point in Iran, opening up a huge potential for trade and cooperation. The rebalancing taking shape in the West Asian region too offers great potential to strengthen India Iran ties. For a long time, India's growing ties with the Gulf countries, especially Saudi Arabia and the UAE, was seen as a zero game. For a long time, India's growing ties with the Gulf countries, especially Saudi Arabia and the UAE, were seen as a zero sum game pitted against their rivalry with Iran. Things are, however, changing in the region rapidly. The reluctance of the US to remain actively engaged in the Middle East has also made the nations in the region think about alternatives. In a move that could indicate breaking away from the US dominance in the region, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, despite being key allies of the US in the region, have declined requests by Washington to scale up oil production in the wake of Russia's war on Ukraine in order to lower the global price of crude oil. The Abraham Accords signed with Israel give hope towards acceptance of Israel by the regional countries as a potential partner and not necessarily a foe. All these developments work well for India as it has close and good relations with the Gulf countries, Iran, and Israel. This gives India the tremendous opportunity to develop and scale up its cooperation with Iran without fear of losing out on other friends in the region. In fact, at some point of time, India may emerge as the perfect interlocutor in the region as it has the trust and confidence of all stakeholders. Now, talking about the advantages of a reset. The International North-South Transport Corridor, an ambitious project launched at the start of this century, aims to connect India, Iran, Afghanistan, Russia, Central Asia, and Europe through multimodal transport, reducing transit time of goods drastically. Although some part of it has been operationalized again due to sanctions on Iran, its full potential has not been realized. India and Iran could well play a major part in giving INSTC, that is International North-South Transport Corridor, that the required boost to reap benefits of resultant trade. The Iran-Oman-India gas pipeline too is an ambitious project that has been stuck for a long time. Fortunately, Iran and Oman signed a deal during Raisi's recent visit on 23rd of May to develop two gas pipelines and an oil field along their maritime borders. If this comes through, there is potential for the pipeline being extended to India, which would help overcome the loss of the failed Iran-Pakistan-India pipeline, that is IPI pipeline, and facilitate the supply of natural gas to India. India and Iran, therefore, have a lot that can be achieved together. The assertive diplomacy being practiced by India, emphasizing on standing by its neighbors and friends and focusing solely on fulfilling its national interests, is a refreshing change. If India can extend the same vision towards its engagement with Iran, it could open a huge potential of cooperation between these two great nations and civilizations. That's it for this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. To join KSG India courses and to crack the IELTS exam, visit ksgindia.com. You can also get a PDF of this podcast on ksgindia.com. Thanks for listening and do subscribe to our channel.